On a gray late afternoon, amidst the hurried chaos of the streets of Belo Horizonte, a frail boy with bare feet and tired eyes approaches an elegant woman sitting on the sidewalk, crying discreetly. She holds a designer bag, but her eyes are empty. Without hesitation, the boy extends his only piece of bread, the last food of the day. "You seem to need it more than I do," he whispers. To many, it would seem like just a small, almost invisible gesture. But in that moment, two worlds collided, the one of extreme poverty and the one of crumbling wealth. His name was Diego, and at the age of 10, he already knew the weight of hunger and the silence of the streets. He slept on cardboard, dreamed of a bed, and collected brief smiles from hurried strangers. His gesture was not one of heroism, but of compassion, a reflection of the little that still remained of his hope. The woman who received his bread, Helena Prado, was the heir to a multimillion-dollar company. But that day, her world had collapsed. Separated from her family, lost in addiction, on the verge of destruction, she saw in his gesture the spark she hadn't found in years: humanity. Diego continued his life without knowing that moment would change everything. He kept facing cold nights, invisible days, and the brutality of a world that rarely looks down. But something about that woman had marked him, the kind of sadness that can't be bought or hidden by expensive clothes. He never forgot her eyes, and she never forgot that bread. The years passed, time shaped destinies, and life, silently, was preparing a reunion no one could have imagined. 15 years later, an unexpected opportunity knocks on Diego's door. Now a weathered young man, but still guided by the kindness that defined him from an early age. What happened to Helena? How did that simple moment in the past trigger a transformation capable of changing both their destinies? Prepare to discover a story of loss, new beginnings, and redemption. Because sometimes, a simple piece of bread can plant the seeds of a miracle. Diego grew up on the streets of Belo Horizonte, where every day seemed like a challenge against hunger, cold, and abandonment. His life was a cycle of scarcity, but his spirit was never broken. However, there was something deeper in his soul, something that made him see the world in a different way. He was only 10 years old when he first saw Helena, alone and lost in her own troubles. While she wore expensive clothes and exuded an aura of wealth, her eyes were dull, sad, as if the shine of money was not enough to warm her heart. He didn't hesitate for a second before approaching, offering her his last piece of bread and asking her not to cry. The woman looked at him in surprise, but also with something else, a mix of shame and recognition. For a brief moment, she saw herself reflected in his vulnerability. "Maybe the world has forgotten me, but you still see me," she thought. But who was this woman really, and how would their lives cross paths again? Many years later, time passed, and Diego continued his journey on the streets, while Helena, despite appearances, was at the bottom of an emotional abyss. Her father, an industrial magnate, had tragically died, leaving her an inheritance of problems she didn't know how to handle. Loneliness swallowed her. She tried to drown herself in alcohol and luxury, seeking comfort where there was none. Diego's simple gesture remained in her memory, however, as a distant echo of something she had lost: genuine compassion. However, she never sought that boy, always thinking he was just a reminder of her own fragility. What she didn't know was that, for Diego, that woman represented something different. He never forgot her. Even with all the difficulties, his thoughts were marked by that look of pain, the one from someone who no longer had anyone to turn to. It motivated him to keep going, despite the adversity, but something else had happened. A latent idea that fate would bring them back together, somehow. When Diego turned 25, he had a simple job at a mechanic's shop. But his dreams were bigger than that. He knew he could offer more to the world, more than others saw in him. He had a generous soul, and the streets would never erase that. One day, while working in the city center, he came across a young woman in distress, trying to get out of a luxury car that was stuck in a puddle of water. It was Helena. She didn't recognize him immediately, but he felt something familiar in her anguished face. Without hesitation, he ran to her, helping her out of the car and guiding her to a safer place. Helena, now in her 30s, looked at him with a strange sense of déjà vu, as if that face had been etched in her heart for a long time. She felt an immense curiosity about him, but what touched her most was his kindness. He didn't have to do that, he could have just walked away. But he chose to help her. What really united them? Was it just a coincidence? Or was there something more between them? Something that connected them in ways that even time couldn't undo? The conversation that followed was tense and full of uncomfortable silences. Diego, however, felt the need to be honest. He told Helena about his childhood, about how the streets had shaped his life, but also about how his gesture that afternoon had transformed him. He revealed that, for years, he had thought about her, the woman he believed he had lost the chance to help. Helena, on the other hand, confessed her own struggles, her failures, and her loneliness. She couldn't escape the weight of being the daughter of the man who always tried to control her life, nor the pressures of a world that treated her with superficiality. Diego's gaze made her feel closer to something genuine, something she had always sought but never found. Their connection, once imperceptible, was now clearer than ever. However, there was something else in the air, a secret from the past that had yet to be revealed. What really happened in Helena's life? Was there something in Diego's gesture that she still didn't fully understand? Over time, they began to meet more often. They started exchanging stories, learning more about each other, and began to feel a friendship blossoming. But there was something more at stake. Fate, which had brought them together so many years ago, now seemed to be intertwining their lives in a mysterious way. Something that, through conversations and encounters, began to become clear. Both were ready to change. But what exactly would change? Diego was still lost in his own world, with the weight of poverty and the desire to create a better future. And Helena, even with her fortune, still struggled with a lack of purpose, with the emptiness that material goods could not fill. She began to see Diego not just as a friend, but as someone who could help her discover a deeper meaning in her life. But she didn't know what he expected from her. What did he really want from someone like her? It was during one of these meetings in a simple cafe in the city center that Diego made a proposal. He had an idea of how they could change their lives together. He proposed creating an organization to help others like him, using his life experience to guide those in the same situation he had been. Helena, though hesitant, saw an opportunity to transform her life and her fortune into something that truly had value. But she knew that this path wouldn't be easy. She would have to face her own demons and the shadows of her past. However, Diego's proposal touched something deep inside her, something she could no longer ignore. But there was a doubt she couldn't shake. What did Diego really want in return? And more importantly, what was he hiding? Diego's idea was more complex than it seemed. What was the true motive behind this generous offer? But the greatest challenge was yet to come. On a stormy night, as they discussed the next steps of the project, Helena received a mysterious letter. The sender was illegible, but the content was clear. Someone knew something about Diego's past, something he had been trying to bury. What had he done? What was being revealed? The two of them were about to discover that their story, so simple and improbable, was actually the reflection of a shared past, something no one could have predicted. What had Diego really done to change Helena's life years ago? The answer was about to emerge, and it would forever alter the course of their lives. Now, more than ever, Helena and Diego had to face what fate had in store for them. What had started as a simple act of kindness would transform their lives in unimaginable ways. And the question hanging in the air was, who was really in control of their story? Diego and Helena had come a long way since that improbable meeting on the streets of Belo Horizonte. Diego's simple act of kindness, which initially seemed like a small gesture, had been the catalyst for a deep transformation in their lives. Today, they were at the helm of an organization that helped people in vulnerable situations, offering support, education, and a chance for a fresh start. The work they had started together not only changed the lives of those they helped, but also gave new purpose to their own existences. With each smile they received in return, they felt the force of destiny, as if the universe had conspired to bring them together. And, above all, they had found something that wealth and luxury could never provide: a sense of belonging and humanity. Diego, now a fulfilled man, saw in the transformed lives his own redemption. He no longer needed to prove anything to anyone. The boy who had grown up on the streets, with nothing, had become a symbol of hope. He had never imagined that the simple act of kindness, done with a pure heart, would take him to a place where he could make a difference in the lives of so many people. The weight of past hardships, though still present, was softened by his work, his life's mission. Every day beside Helena was a reminder of the power of choice and the strength of a simple act of empathy. And, seeing the grateful eyes of the people he helped, Diego knew that their future was safer, more promising. Helena, in turn, was experiencing an equally deep transformation. She had left behind the empty, solitary woman she had once been. Her work with Diego gave her a reason to wake up every day, a way to redeem herself for the mistakes of the past and the burden of the family legacy that had always weighed on her. What once seemed futile now had a purpose. Her relationship with Diego, which had begun with curiosity and temporary relief, had become a solid friendship and a true partnership. Together, they were stronger than they had ever been alone, and she could not be more grateful to have him in her life. Their friendship had turned into an indestructible bond, making them face any challenge with renewed courage. However, the secrets of the past had never fully disappeared. Sometimes, Helena wondered if something more had happened that stormy night when the mysterious letter appeared, and whether fate had really brought them together because of a simple gesture. But deep down, she knew that the true reason they were together was something deeper than any coincidence. It was a force beyond logical understanding, an invisible force that guided their lives towards something greater. The past, with all its shadows, now seemed a fertile ground for learning and growth. Helena and Diego understood that, throughout their journey, what mattered was not so much the mistakes they had made, but how they chose to deal with the challenges life had thrown at them. The legacy of Diego and Helena was not just the success of their organization, but the impact on the people who crossed their path. Their work not only offered a chance for a new beginning, but a chance to understand that everyone has the power to change their own story. Each person who received help from their foundation carried with them the message that kindness, when shared, can create waves of transformation that spread far beyond our own lives. The spark of hope ignited by that unexpected encounter spread throughout the city, touching hearts and lighting the paths of everyone around. The true transformation was not just of Diego and Helena, but of an entire community, now understanding the value of genuine compassion. In the final scene, as they watched the sunset over the city that meant so much to both of them, Diego and Helena realized that, despite the hardships and mysteries of the past, they had found their true purpose. There was no more fear, no more uncertainty. The future stretched before them, full of possibilities, with love and friendship as the central pillars. In silence, they looked at each other, recognizing not only what they had accomplished, but everything they had learned. Their journey, though full of challenges and surprises, was far from over. On the contrary, it had only just begun. Hope, human connection, and the power of kindness were now the keys to a bright future, and they knew that, as long as they were together, they could face any storm. The impact of that improbable encounter would extend for many generations, forever changing the course of their lives and those who crossed their path.